Greetings, brothers and sisters, with a passion for the world's oldest flint tools and art. This is episode 2, part 3, and focuses on eoliths and hand axes. Let's talk about eoliths. These are some of the most controversial finds in the history of archaeology. Flint tools reported from geological layers millions of years old, and yet time and again, they've been dismissed as nothing more than geofacts, naturally broken stones. The rejection wasn't based on what they look like. Anyone with a working knowledge of flint knapping, anyone who can see the difference between a random fracture and a deliberate removal, recognizes that many of these pieces show all the hallmarks of workmanship: percussion bulbs, striking platforms, ripple lines, and above all, consistent unifacial retouch. These are signatures of cognition, design, and agency. The problem was never the technology, it was the timeline. Because the layers that produced these tools were simply too old for the accepted story of human origins, the artifacts were written off. Abbé Bourgeois at Tenay in France showed flaked tools sealed in lower Miocene strata over 20 million years old. At Aurillac in the French Massif Central, worked flakes came out of upper Miocene river sands, roughly 8 to 10 million years old. And at Boncel in Belgium, Aimé Routeau uncovered hundreds of worked flints from the upper Oligocene, close to 30 million years old. Each time the artifacts were judged not on their features, but on the assumption that humans simply could not have existed at those dates. Even Henri Breuil, one of the giants of Paleolithic archaeology, admitted that the Belassese flints looked indistinguishable from accepted Paleolithic tools. But he still called them pseudo-eoliths because their Paleocene age was deemed impossible. In other words, the evidence was dismissed not because it lacked workmanship, but because it didn't fit the paradigm. Fast forward. New evidence in Europe is now pushing the age of tool-making humans back to nearly 2 million years ago. At sites like Atapuerca in Spain, hominin remains and stone tools show that early humans were present in Europe far earlier than once believed. That is uncomfortably close to the younger end of the Tertiary Eolith record. So the question is, if we accept 2 million years, why not 3 or 5 or 10? But it goes even further. Some of these so-called eoliths are not just extremely ancient, if we accept the geological record as fact, but the work stones themselves also contain astonishing artistic features. Many appear deliberately shaped into recognizable forms. Some even seem to carry images reminiscent of modern clothed humans, not crude hominids. If that is true, then eoliths don't just challenge the timeline of tool-making. They completely overturn the entire narrative of human evolution. Accepting that highly cognitive, artistically skilled peoples existed in deep time makes far more sense than the current story, because nothing in the fossil record shows the kind of dramatic, stepwise, morphological transformations demanded by the orthodox model. In fact, over tens of millions of years, many lineages, dragonflies, spiders, crabs, horseshoe crabs, and countless others, show virtually no change at all. And remember, these organisms have life cycles that are hundreds, even thousands of times shorter than ours, meaning they pass through vastly more generations in the same span of time. Yet we're asked to believe that within a far shorter window, humans transformed from non-tool-using apes into anatomically modern beings with culture, art, and language. When viewed against the stability of the rest of the fossil record, the evidence from eoliths suggests a far deeper and more continuous human story, one that stretches back into epochs we've long assumed were empty of us. So as you've been listening, I've been showing parts of the assemblage from my site. These are mostly the larger implements: hand axes, ovats, bifaces, and I've arranged them into typologies, grouping similar shapes together. What stands out is the sheer variety: a wide range of Achillean-style ovats and hand axes, clear, unifacially worked pieces, plate flint artifacts, and even older ones like choppers and flakes. And remember, what you're seeing here is only a small sample. Just the tools I had at hand to bring into this video. It really is just the tip of the iceberg. You may also have noticed that among the tools there are recurring figurative profiles, particularly ape-like faces, along with other common motifs. But here, the focus is strictly on the tools themselves. Recognizable forms, consistent typologies, and recurring shapes. And this is where the connection becomes important. These tool forms don't stand in isolation. They echo the very same types described by the early antiquarians. Researchers like Benjamin Harrison in Kent, Abbé Bourgeois at Tenay, Charles Tardy at Aurillac, Aimé Routot at Boncel, and Henri Breuil at Belle-Assise. Their so-called Eoliths were dismissed as natural accidents, yet the same morphologies appear here, in my assemblage, under our own eyes. But what really adds weight to this assemblage is the geological setting. All of these tools are being recovered from right at the interface between the modern soil and the bedrock below. And that bedrock is the Cretaceous chalk, laid down some 66 million years ago. Over most of the site, the soil layer above the chalk is extremely thin, sometimes no more than a foot or less. The tools sit directly in that narrow horizon, and in places where trees have been uprooted or animals have dug, you can actually see the flints lying on the chalk surface itself. I've even recovered a few pieces straight out of the chalk face, where they were sealed possibly by subsidence or slope movement. And across the ridge there is evidence of ancient chalk working in extraction, which may also have exposed or re-exposed some of these artifacts. The key point is this: the assemblage is not washing in from somewhere else, and it's not random. The tools consistently occur at the soil chalk boundary, which in geological terms is a marker horizon, an interface where relic plateau gravels once sat, now eroded away, leaving only their artifacts behind. In other words, what this really means is that these finds are not recent at all. They are sitting directly on top of 66-million-year-old chalk in a soil horizon so thin it can't conceal long sequences of later activity. And when we look at the thick white patina, sometimes millimeters deep, that coats so many of the artifacts, it all points in the same direction. Taken together, the geology and the surface chemistry strongly suggest these tools are not thousands, but millions of years in age. That's the scale of antiquity we're dealing with here. I claim a few genuine firsts with this discovery, though I stand on the shoulders of many good people who came before me, even if sadly none of them are alive today to see this. One of my early firsts was calling out misidentification, telling American researchers that the rocks they were labeling as humans actually contained ape-like images, and pointing out that attributing these items to Native American tribes of the last 13,000 years was a mistake. Thanks in part to that work, that habit has mostly stopped. But those are really trivialities compared to the deeper breakthroughs. The truly important discoveries are the motifs themselves and where they occur. For example, hands embedded within hand axes. Hand axes, in fact, hold a whole plethora of motifs, and the same motifs turn up in Paleolithic finds worldwide. Yes, really, there's a common global lexicon and convention, and it simply must be linked. I've also shown how these motifs can be made visible through animations and visual reconstructions. But perhaps my most important contribution has been to supply the scientific proof, explanations, and methodology that demonstrate these finds are a reality, not some trick of the mind like apophenia or pareidolia. This work takes the conversation out of the realm of speculation and into the realm of evidence. And the way I've been able to do this has really been obvious since at least 2012. The difference is that I'm not just showing random rocks and hoping people will see something. I have an actual assemblage of tools, white, heavily patinated flint implements that combine recognizable tool forms with clear, detailed images built into them. That's what sets this work apart. Where others only hinted at possibilities, I've been able to demonstrate something concrete, coherent images and motifs within a real archaeological style assemblage, tools and art objects together. It's that combination, technology plus imagery, that makes the case impossible to dismiss as simple imagination. Let's look at this painting by Benjamin Harrison, showing some of his early Eolith finds. Notice how many of these pieces are made on flat plates of flint. Plate flint makes perfect sense. Compared to the irregular, blobby nodules you usually find in chalk, flat plates are consistent, predictable, and much easier to work. That consistency meant techniques could be refined, edges struck more efficiently, and tools fashioned quickly with far less waste. Some of these plate tools may have been only rudimentarily shaped, left as prepared blanks. They worked as they were, but could be later refined, resharpened, or even personalized. Think of it as an early form of mass production, a lighter, more professional way of doing business, and a resource that could be traded. We know that Neolithic flint miners at Grimes Graves in Norfolk, around 4,500 years ago, specifically targeted tabular flint for axe and blade production. In the Upper Paleolithic of northern France and Belgium, flat flint slabs were used as anvils and hammering surfaces. And throughout the Mesolithic in Scandinavia, thin flint plates were struck into regular microliths. Even in the Oldowan tradition, the earliest stone tool industry known from Africa, over 2.5 million years ago, flat slabs were used as anvils, paired with hammerstones. This basic principle carried forward. Flat flint plates weren't just convenient blanks. They were also the working surfaces that made early tool production possible. But these plates weren't only about efficiency. The layered structure of flint can be a bit like agate. Exposing different depths can reveal subtle color contrasts, cortex versus interior. Prehistoric artisans could exploit this for figurative or decorative expression. So plate flints carried a dual significance. They were functional resources, ideal for rapid tool production and trade. But they also held symbolic potential as canvases for expression. In this sense, they bridge economy and art, reminding us that even the simplest materials could carry both practical and cultural weight in prehistoric life. Shallow cortex removal on this plate flint piece has left a whole elephant shape, bordered by the edges of the tablet. To see an elephant depiction in finds from my site is no surprise. It's like finding ducks in a duck pond. This plate flint piece was most likely used as an anvil, and extensively by the looks of it, it has hundreds of small flake removal scars covering the surface. Here are some of the more striking examples of plate flint from my site, pieces that are worked with real skill. This specimen is especially remarkable, a horsehead motif, a superb example of Paleolithic art. Its outline, proportions, and clarity of form leave little doubt as to artistic intention. Notice how the rippling within the flint has been used deliberately, creating the flowing texture of a mane. It's the product of controlled percussive blows. The napper has driven and terminated flakes so that the ripple marks from conchoidal fracture line up like a flowing mane. That takes supreme skill and real forethought, planning the blow direction, force, and platform angles so the stone's internal waves become texture. On the reverse side, there is a second horse head, this time the eye picked out by a deposit of dark pigment, something I encounter often at this site. The effect is striking, as if the artisan wanted the stone itself to carry two perspectives of the same animal. We know from nearby Boxgrove, dated to about 500,000 years ago, MIS 13, that early humans in this landscape were hunting and butchering large animals, including horses. So horses were not just part of the ecology, they were central to survival. That connection makes the artistic portrayal here all the more compelling. This isn't random shaping, but a deliberate engagement with one of the key animals in their world. Thanks for watching and for following along with this journey into deep prehistory. If you've enjoyed what you've seen, please like, subscribe, and share. It really does help the channel grow, and it's your support that makes this kind of work possible. There's so much more to uncover, and with your help, I can keep bringing these discoveries to light. So stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next episode.